Hello, Rune Scholar, wherever and whenever you are. I'm the modern Erilar. Now that we've discussed how to choose and divide the ground onto which we are placing our runes, today let's discuss whether and how to divide our runes into words. Often in runic writing, there is no discernible division between words, and this can make it difficult to decide how to interpret the individual words that make up the full meaning of the text. The practice of dividing words when writing in runes seems to have varied from writer to writer, even when we compare inscriptions chronologically or geographically, so there exists a wide range of possibilities for those of us who want to write in runes. The presence or absence of word division does not correlate with other indicators of literacy like orthography, meaning spelling, references to poetry, or the conveyance of complex ideas through writing. So it wouldn't be fair to say, for example, that if you didn't divide your words, you were relatively illiterate. Ecclesiastical and urban contexts both show this kind of variation. Far and away, the two most common practices were at the extremes, with either no word division or consistently marked word division. The earliest inscriptions seem to have found word division unnecessary to create meaning, and many Elder Futhark inscriptions did not divide runes into separate words. If rune writers did divide their words, they did not use space, but instead used division marks. Use of these division marks became somewhat consistent during the Viking Age, but even as late as the medieval period, we still see many inscriptions that did not divide the runes into words, and this practice never gained acceptance on a broad scale. So you can see that this medieval inscription has no division marks. Most of the examples where word division was consistent, and especially those that used space instead of division marks, show some other features which indicate some influence from Latin writing practices, such as the dotted runes, like those on the Aarhus stone, doubled consonants, and bind runes. So we can conclude that consistent word division, especially using spacing, may correlate with and may have been influenced by Latin literacy. But even runic inscriptions where Latin is transliterated into runes do not regularly use spacing and instead use division marks to divide their words. So the correlation between spacing out the words and Latin literacy isn't that conclusive quite yet. If word division was marked during the Viking Age and into the medieval period, it still tended to be through marks, like the 3 dots that we can see dividing different words in this inscription from Hamre. Using space instead of division marks was relatively sporadic. So if we choose to divide the words within our runic text, and the most common way to accomplish this was with division marks, which marks can we choose? Many of the types of division marks were consistent between Elder Futhark and Younger Futhark inscriptions. So we can choose a small x and sometimes 2 x's arranged one above the other, like we saw on the Aarhus stone just pictured. We could use a small cross or a plus sign, dots, colons, or between 3 and 6 dots, all arranged in a vertical line. And the rune writer at Loveden Hill used plain vertical lines, and we sometimes see that in Sweden as well. Rune writers could also alternate between various possibilities. The rune writer of U135 from Uppland used a combination of a plus sign mark and a single dot in terms of their division marks. And a medieval tuning fork used both dots and a small x in the same inscription. So these are 4 sides of the same 4-sided implement. And we know that not all rune writers always used the same division marks. The prolific Upplandic runestone carver Uppir used either a single dot or a small vertical stroke. Tinnika Luijenga, in her work Texts and Contexts of the Oldest Runic Inscriptions, has collected interpretations from multiple other scholars that certain other rune-like symbols may also have functioned as word dividers, but these tend to be unique. For example, on two of the Weser bone inscriptions, which may date to the 5th century or earlier, an ing-like rune may have functioned as a word divider, but not all rune scholars are yet completely convinced of the authenticity of the two Weser inscriptions. I think that's the kindest way I can put it. So now that we know what word dividers historical rune writers have used, where in our text should we put these dividers? Well, that has a lot of variation as well. In a small number of Elder Futhark inscriptions, we see marks that may simply mark the beginning of the inscription, called ingress signs. On the Harford Farm brooch from Castor by Norwich from around 650 of the Common Era, and on a whalebone staff from Bernsteburen, this is a single slanting stroke. On the Bezenje or Pallersdorf II bow fibula from Hungary, an incomplete cown in its caret form may either represent a K sound or represent an ingress sign. On a brooch from Neudigenbach, a rune-like sign that may be an ingress sign looks like a triangle with the points directed down, up, and to the left. The Castor by Norwich brooch also illustrates how some inscriptions set names off with a word divider, and we can also see this on the Shelby runestone as well, that is KJ61. Other inscriptions place division marks between several names, and you can see that here from a belt buckle from Weimar, while others they put the division marks between the subject and the verb. So some of these show the subject and the verb written together without division in Elder Futhark. For example, on the Raumköge inscription, Hariu Hahaitika, Hariu Ha I am called, the subject and the verb are written together. So there's a lot of variation there. And some inscriptions separate the verb and the object. Some inscriptions separate the verb, subject, and object. Rune writers can also use dividers between syllables. In DR 295, the phrase at Uppsala was written at Uppsalem. You can also divide compound words, especially if the components themselves function as words in their own right. An inscription from the Vinje Stave Church does this, where they divide the word for Saturday, Laugardagen, into Laugar and Dagen. Sometimes rune writers chose to divide groups of words. The writer of business letter N650 from Briegen tends to divide phrases, but the divisions don't quite correlate to where we would place a comma, for instance, in modern English. In many instances, rune writers would not divide a monosyllabic preposition from its object. So in N446 at Tingvoll, I helgum is written Ihelgum altogether without division, and in N603, in amore, in love, is altogether, whereas it's set off with division marks. Then again, we can choose to be inconsistent. In inscription N648, lines A and B separate words consistently, though not with a consistent type of division mark. In lines C and D, though, the writer uses only 2 division marks overall, and the rest of the word divisions they indicate by using spacing. Or we can choose to be consistent and go the extra mile. In one fascinating example, N631 from Briegen, the rune writer consistently used separators between words and used a double word separator between sentences. So that's also an option. And then finally, some word dividers may simply end the inscription, called termination marks. On the Forsen silver belt buckle, an interlocking zigzag line takes up space after the final word of the inscription. In the Eskelheim church on Gotland, a large X, reminiscent of an elder Futhark gabo in an otherwise short twig Gotlandic inscription, ends the inscription. In short, division marks tend to be personal, and rune scholars haven't yet discerned any consistent patterns correlating word division to geography, chronology, or degree of Latin literacy. So choice of whether to use division marks or which to use can be very much up to the individual. Next time, let's discuss how to make runic writing more efficient through space-saving techniques. Thank you for writing the runes with me, the Modern Erilar.